Alright, so in this video we're going to take a look at the BorderPane layout container. So this container is going to be used to display content in 5 distinct regions. So we're going to have a top, a bottom, a left, a right, and then a center. So there's a couple of different ways we can go about constructing a new BorderPane object. The first is to use the noargs constructor for BorderPane. So this is very similar to if we construct a new GridPane object where it's initially going to have no content inside of it, so initially be empty. And then you'll just use some adding method to go ahead and add content to it a little bit later in your application. Alternatively, there's 2 other constructors you can use. So the next one is going to be to create a new BorderPane object and specify the center piece of content for it. Or you can also include this final constructor where you're specifying the center content, and then you're also specifying the top, right, bottom, and left. So for those last 4 regions, to keep the order in mind, it's very similar to when you're adding padding with the insets class. If you're specifying padding for all 4 sides, remember that you start from the top and then go clockwise around a container. So this is very similar. You'll start with the center as the very first argument, and then you move up to the top and you'll go clockwise around those outer 4 regions of your BorderPane. So you'll go to the top, and then the right, and then the bottom, and then the left. And once you've set up or you've constructed your BorderPane object, you can then go ahead and start setting the content for each one of these regions by using these 5 different set methods. So these are primarily going to be useful if you either use the noargs constructor, or maybe you use just the first parameterized constructor that takes just a single argument. And then you can go ahead and just add content for the remaining regions as necessary. So in this case, we're looking at set center, set top, set right, set bottom, and set left. So to take a quick look at this BorderPane actually being used in an application, I actually have an application already prepared and ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. We'll go through the content that I'm adding to each one of the regions, and then show how all of that's being organized in the BorderPane layout itself. So go ahead and minimize these slides. We'll open up NetBeans. And inside of here, I've got this project that I called Web Page. So our Java program is just going to be Web Page. Inside of this, these first 3 imports are going to be for the application, stage, and scene. So pretty standard imports that you'll need for all of your JavaFX applications. The next 3 are going to be for the different layouts that I'm going to be using in this. So I'm going to use the BorderPane. This is going to end up being the root node of the scene. This will hold all of the content for it. I've also included an HBox and a VBox for 2 of the labels. So just like I showed in the video about containers, it is possible to include nested containers by using the BorderPane. It is important to remember one particular rule about each of those regions for the BorderPane is that you can kind of think of each individual region of the BorderPane as being sort of like its own scene, in the sense that you can't have multiple pieces of content in a BorderPane. There has to be a single kind of root node exclusive to that region. But as far as the overall scene is concerned for this application, the BorderPane will be the root node of the overall scene. Then I'm going to go ahead and include a couple of different controls. We also have images, so we're going to have some labels, some buttons, and some image views. For some of these, they're going to be put into these HBoxes and VBoxes, and then those HBoxes and VBoxes will be put into the BorderPane. In other cases, I'm just going to have a single control in some of these regions, so you just see a single label for some of them. We've also got the insets and the pause class from the geometry package, so we can go ahead and do a little bit of positioning with this. So then coming into the start method right here, so we've got our different buttons that I'm going to be using for the top regions content. So since this is going to be a web page, or at least a sort of rough sketch of a web page, I'm going to use 4 buttons here that kind of represent the different pages that you might want to navigate to for your overall website. So we've got a home, about, products, and contact. I'm then going to go ahead and create an hbox that I'm going to call header. So this is going to be kind of like the header of my web page, and it's going to hold each of those 4 buttons. I'm also going to go ahead and give it a little bit of spacing between them, and I'm going to go ahead and set some padding. So we'll do 10 pixels of spacing and 10 pixels of padding for this. For the next part, for the center region's content, so for this one, I'm going to go ahead and just create a label. For this one, I'm just using some dummy text. So a pretty standard practice in web development when you add dummy content or just kind of filler content, just to kind of show the layout for a particular web page, is to use this Latin phrase. There's actually a website that just automatically generates a bunch of this text for you. So that's what I ended up using to just put a bunch of text into this. We've got all that text here. Ideally, should be wrapping to the next line. And then what I went ahead and did is set the padding for this center region's content. In this case, I focused on setting some padding on the left and right. So I did that for the 2nd and 4th arguments. But as far as the top and bottom is concerned, I didn't set any padding for those. Then for the left region's content, went ahead and made 2 other buttons. So these buttons, you can think of them as being sort of like navigational buttons for that particular page. So maybe you'd have a button, kind of like a table of contents. So the first one's to be able to immediately navigate back to the first paragraph of a very long, maybe article of content. And then this next button is going to be to immediately navigate to the 2nd paragraph in that content. I then went ahead and put these 2 buttons into a VBox that I called left column. So this is going to be a VBox with 10 pixels of spacing. I went ahead and set the alignment to center them. So this is primarily to keep them vertically centered in that column. And then I went ahead and set the padding. For this particular one, I just wanted to focus on padding on the left-hand side, so primarily to keep it from being up against the leftmost edge of the application window. Right here, I went ahead and loaded an image on my system. So I'm using the file protocol. So I'm going to get this computerscience.jpg image. I'll then go ahead and make an image view with that. And then I've also got this extra label to go with it. You can kind of think of this, right now it's got some dummy text, but essentially it could be like a title to go with that image. I then went ahead and set the preserve ratio to be true for my image view, and then set its fit width to 200. So basically just adjusting the dimensions and also making sure that it automatically resizes to maintain its aspect ratio. And once I did that little bit of formatting to my image, I went ahead and took the image and the label and I put those into a right column. So this is going to be another VBox. For this one, I wanted to put a little bit of extra spacing between the image and its label, so I used 15 pixels of spacing between them. Just like with the left column, the right column is also going to be centered, primarily to keep them vertically centered. And also similar to the left column, I'm going to do some padding, but for this one it's going to be exclusively on the right-hand side, so that this content isn't pushed right up against the rightmost edge of the application window. For the bottom region, I'm essentially going to treat this as if it were like some contact info, maybe a copyright for your web page. So we've got 2 labels here. For this copyright, I'm also including this char and then the value 169. So 169 is actually the Unicode value for the copyright symbol. So when I actually run this application, you'll be able to see this in the bottom region. And then I'm going to put these into another VBox that I call footer. So we'll have the contact info above the copyright. There'll be 10 pixels of spacing. Just like with the left and right columns, to keep these somewhat vertically centered, I'm going to be using paused at center. In this case, this is also very useful for keeping them centered horizontally as well, since it's going to put them right in the very center of the footer or the bottom region of my border pane. And then right here, we're going to go ahead and actually create the border pane. So we're going to use the primary content. This is going to be for the center region. The header, this is going to be for the top region. The right column, that's going to be for the right region. The footer, that's going to be for the bottom region. And then the left column, and that's going to be for the left region. I'll use the web page as the root node of my scene, so I'm going to specify that here. We're going to do 800 as the width, and then 300 as the height. We'll go ahead and set the scene for our stage. We'll go ahead and set the title for this one. I'm just going to call it web page. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and display this, display the application window. So now that we've seen all that, I'll go ahead and run this. So we'll come over here, go ahead and run this, and we can now see each one of these different pieces of content. So we've got our H box up at the top. There are 4 different buttons for the home, about, products, and contact. We've got our left column over here with our first paragraph and second paragraph. We've got our center region with our primary content. So you can kind of think of this like an article. We've got our right region, our right column over here with our image of computer science, and then our little title to go with that. And then right down here in the bottom region, we can see our contact info, we can see our copyright, and that copyright symbol using that character with the 169 Unicode. So this is showing it with all 5 of our regions already specified in the constructor. Another way that we could do this, so I'll go ahead and show one other way that we could approach this by using the noargs constructor and then using the different set methods. So I'll go ahead and comment this out. Go ahead and remove both lines for that. And then right here, we'll go ahead and just recreate our border pane. So again, this is still going to be web page. This is equal to a new border pane, but now I won't specify any arguments for my constructor. Instead, we'll go ahead and use web page, and we'll do set. Let's start with set center. So this will hold the primary content. We'll then go ahead and do webpage.set top. This is going to be for the header. We'll do webpage.set. Let's go set right. This is going to be for the right column. Do webpage.set bottom. That's going to be for the footer. And then finally we'll do webpage.set left. And that's going to be for the left column. Go ahead and save that. And then we'll run it again. And we can see we still get the same content. We've just now changed the code that we're using to actually add all of that content to our application. Alright, so this is going to complete everything for the border pane layout. In the next video, we're going to wrap up Chapter 12 by briefly talking about the observable list interface.